This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Welcome to Plain Talk. I'm your host, Rob Port. Before the state legislature in Bismarck, there is a bill. It's Senate Bill 2271. It's introduced by Senator Richard Erbely. And what it would do is, it's a little bit odd. What it would do, why don't I just quote directly from the bill draft? And I should point out this has already passed the Senate, and it passed by a wide margin, 43-3. The bill says, I quote, "Unless a recount has been requested, a public officer, employee, or contractor of this state or of a political subdivision of this state may not release to the public the number of votes cast in the general election for the office of President of the United States until after the times set by law for the meetings and votes of the presidential electors in all states." Why would we want to do this? I'm not real sure. Here to talk with me about it is Saul Anuzis. Saul is a longtime leader in the Republican Party. He hails from the state of Michigan, where he's led the Republican Party there. He's also been the candidate for the chairman of the Republican National Committee. Mr. Anuzis, thank you for your time.
Hey, great to be with you, Rob. Thank you.
You have a lot of expertise in this area. First of all, what's motivating this? I mean, why on earth would we not want to be transparent? Because most of us are used as election night, as the votes roll in, we're watching the vote totals go up as they're counted. It was a little bit different this year, obviously, because the pandemic kind of changed the way we did some of that. But for the most part, that's the tradition. We watch the votes get counted up. We watch which candidate gets how many votes, and then we know who the winner is. And for the presidential election, that's not necessarily the winner. Of course, the Electoral College ultimately weighs in, but why would we want to make this process more opaque? That's what I see this bill as doing.
Well, you're right. I mean, I think it's horrible public policy. I mean, the idea that secret vote counts, for all types of purposes, conflict with the basic principles of having public oversight of elections, whether it's watchdog groups, candidates, political parties, the media, or even citizens individually. So the idea that somehow they're going to create this secret ballot situation, secret vote counting situation that basically goes from your local county clerks all the way up to the state canvassers, and then it's kept secret until after the Electoral College meets, is really an absurd idea, I think. This bill actually came up a couple times in various states, and it died unanimously in the New Hampshire legislature. It never got out of either committee. Even your neighbors south of the border here at South Dakota legislature, the Senate defeated it 31-1 once it came to the floor. But I think people kind of jumped in and discussed this, where in your case, I think a lobbyist who basically opposes the national popular vote concept got somebody to introduce the bill, said that it was, made good sense, that it was the right thing to do to help stop national popular vote. And it's kind of a ironic way of approaching it. I think it's a little too clever by half, because I think it violates a lot of various and conflicts with a lot of various state laws currently on the books in North Dakota with regards to how you count your elections, how you report your elections, what's public, what's not, recounts, etc. And then it also conflicts with federal law. I mean, there are requirements with regards to certificate of ascertainment, turning in your votes before the Electoral College meets. And so this lobbyist, I think, was a little too clever by half, as some people refer to it, and he tried to come up with a clever way to say, well, if North Dakota wouldn't, announce their votes, somehow they could stop this effort to move to a national popular vote. My argument is, look, if you don't like the national popular, bring it up for a vote in the North Dakota legislature and kill it. Make it clear that you're, opposed to a specific proposal. But to do this kind of through a backdoor, clandestine, way that also, I think, sets horrible precedent after we just went through a very tough election where everybody's worried about transparency and openness, et cetera. I think this is horrible legislation. I think that people were hoodwinked to kind of do this because nobody discussed it. And, can you imagine us having secret elections for the President of the United States? I mean, the potential for fraud around the country. Let's say other states decided to follow North Dakota. I mean, if North Dakota is going to be clever and do secret elections, why shouldn't Illinois and have Chicago provide secret elections, or New York and New York City be the secret election hub, or my home state of Michigan and Detroit be the secret election hub? Just imagine the precedent that is being set here and the example that they are giving to the rest of the country.
Well, one thing that really worries me, and I should make it clear here, I don't like the idea of electing the president by the national popular vote. I am very much a supporter of the Electoral College. I think that's what serves states like North Dakota the best. But this is not the way to oppose that. And the reason why is the orderly transition of power is important. And I think, again, you just referenced this last election. We could probably reference the previous elections as well. The orderly transition of power is important. And part of that is having a very efficient vote and conclusion to that vote, right? So we cast the ballots and a reasonable amount of time to do the counts and to make sure we get the counts accurately, to provide some time for appeal. If we draw that process out and we don't know the actual vote counts in some of these areas, we open the door to fraud. We make it harder to detect that fraud. We make it harder for if one candidate or the other might want to step in and say, hey, there's some problems here. I want a recount, or I want an investigation, or what have you. You're slamming the door on a lot of that, or at the very least, you're shortening the window during which a lot of that can happen by having the actual vote counts be opaque. And we should be clear, we're not just talking about the vote counts. You load up the Secretary of State's website and you see the total number of votes. You drill down from, a lot of times you can detect fraud or funny business going on by drilling down and looking at precinct level votes, county level votes. That's very, very important. And not just, members of the news media or campaign staff or election officials the public needs to be able to see that. It's our process. We should have access to it. So this seems ridiculous to me, and I'm surprised it sailed through our state Senate. Last week they voted, like I mentioned earlier, it was a 43-3, just 3 no votes in our state Senate against this bill. It now heads over to the House after crossover. But Saul, I don't. You've been referencing a lobbyist. Who's behind this? Can we name names?
So there's there's a guy named Sean Parnell who's a paid lobbyist for the anti-movement National Popular Vote. And again, there's a lot of confusion as to what National Popular Vote is. There's 2 different proposals, because you brought up a very important distinction. There's a federal proposal to basically eliminate the Electoral College and go to a pure National Popular Vote. I don't support that. I don't know a single Republican in the country that supports that, but that's the one that's kind of out there that you hear, Elizabeth Warren and other liberals touting nationally. There's another one that actually does have a lot of bipartisan support, and someday, maybe we'll have a discussion about it in North Dakota, but it's called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and that actually preserves the Electoral College, keeps the elections in the states, and makes sure the states have influence over it. But again, that's a separate issue, as you discussed. But I think it's important that people understand there's a couple different proposals out there. But you brought up 2 very important principles in your commentary here. Number one is that transfer of power, what makes the United States of America unique in the world. We are the only country in the world that for over 200 years have transferred power, at the White House of the presidency from one party to another in a peaceful, normal manner. And much of that depends on, as you said, the vote count and how it's done. If all of a sudden one state legitimizes or another state legitimizes, or even a local municipality comes up with some kind of clever, secretive, unique move to do something different, but what they're in effect doing is creating the potential process for fraud, where you can't look into local elections, where you can't look into statewide elections until after the Electoral College meets. I think that's a recipe for disaster. I think on principle, it's a horrible idea. And so I think you're right in your commentary that the idea that, and I don't know, maybe just a whole lot of senators, just heard part of it and thought, oh, somehow this makes sense. But the reality is you're setting a precedent where if it's okay for North Dakota, why isn't it okay for California or some other very far left state to do the same thing? And now you've created complete chaos, no oversight, no ability to confirm how presidents are elected until after the Electoral College meets. That's an absurd process in principle in and of itself.
I mean, you could argue, I guess, that North Dakota, the outcome of a presidential election in North Dakota is usually not in contest. I don't think we voted for a Democratic president since, gosh, LBJ, I think, off the top of my head. So it's been a while. But that being said, it doesn't matter, right? The political that could shift one day, right? North Dakota could become a place that happens. Political winds shift. It's the partisanship of it is irrelevant. What really worries me is we live in an age where there's so many conspiracy theories, and right. Particularly around elections. We have a whole thing going on now where we have like voting management system companies, or they're suing people. We have all sorts of information, but this is not a new thing. I can roll back to the George W. Bush years. I remember when Democrats were hatching conspiracy theories about Diebold voting machines, right? And
Sure.
Diebold executives made political contributions to Republicans. Therefore, the fix must have been in. And what worries me is when you rob the public of information, right? Because we already live in an era where it's very, very hard to get the public focused on the facts. If you take some of the facts off the table, such as vote counts, you're just creating more of a vacuum for people to fill, nefarious people with not good intentions to fill with nonsense.
Well, look, this is almost kind of like a politburo proposal that you would expect from Soviet Russia. What was either Lenin or Stalin was credited as saying it's not important who votes, it's important who counts the votes. And North Dakota is falling into that trap. I mean, it is an unbelievable proposal that the average citizen, as you're saying, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian or independent. The idea that there's some politicians that think it's okay to keep voting secret and to have secret vote counts across the state of North Dakota. And don't worry, wink, wink, trust us, we'll be on the right side. Again, today, from a Michigan Republican's perspective, I look at North Dakota from a partisan standpoint and think of you guys as God's country. I mean, we're very thankful for the fact that you're consistently a Republican state. But, when you go across the country, there are more states that are consistently Democrat. And the swing states, look, you and I could sit down here in probably 3 minutes and walk through all 50 states and with 99.9% accuracy determine where 38 to 40 of those are going to vote in the next presidential election.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be down to 10 to 12 potential battleground states. And historically, it's come down to like 3 or 4. So what happens is, for all practical purposes, we elect the president of the battleground states of America versus the president of the United States of America because of all the influence that these few battleground states have. Now, the bad news is most of them are predominantly Democrat or lean Democrat and have some very large Democratic strongholds that could just as easily manipulate the electoral system the way North Dakota is attempting to manipulate the electoral system. And if the city of Detroit were to try to pull the exact same move that North Dakota is doing, or if Chicago or Miami, which is in a swing state, or Pittsburgh, which is in a swing state of Pennsylvania. I mean, you can go through example with hardcore, very large blocks of Democratic votes. And if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, right? If North Dakota thinks it's okay to have secret ballots, why wouldn't any other city in the country who wants to play this game have secret ballots? And this is one of the issues. We're always on election night, we keep waiting for those results to come in. And it's always ironic how some of these largest Democratic cities happen to wait to turn in their election results until all the other election results are known. And that's one of the reasons we have these conspiracy theories, because there is a possibility, if not the probability, and some examples of new votes showing up.
Sure.
And when you have a secret ballot and you hold it off until a certain period of time, or even worse, until the Electoral College, which again I think is illegal from a federal standpoint, it's crazy to do that. It's crazy to set that precedent, because other people could look at it and say very righteously, well, look, North Dakota, a good, safe Republican state, no controversy there. If they think it's okay, why wouldn't it be okay in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Could you imagine the Georgia elections today if Atlanta had a similar law like North Dakota's talking about?
Yeah.
And again, this can be done at the city, the state, the county, any level you want, because all you're doing is agreeing to keep your votes secret.
Well,
it's a crazy proposal.
Which exposes another problem. I think here in North Dakota, maybe a lot of these senators are thinking, well, Al Jaeger counts the votes, right? And we like Al Jaeger. He's been around since the Clinton administration. He's been our Secretary of State forever. We trust him, and we have a good process. So, we don't have any qualms about making our process. But the thing is Al Jaeger's probably not going to be our Secretary of State by the time the next election rolls around. I think he's going to retire. We may have somebody different. Maybe that person will be trustworthy too, or maybe they won't be. The problem is these systems are based on human beings. And you get a big enough crowd of human beings, you're going to have some schmucks in it. And you cannot, one of the reasons why we have a transparent process is to keep the schmucks honest. And even if you could argue there's no schmucks in North Dakota today, there might be tomorrow, and we got to have a transparent process so that we can scrutinize this. It's remarkable to me because I don't know that this bill has really gotten any attention in North Dakota as consequential a piece of legislation as it is. It really hasn't gotten a lot of attention, and that's a little bit frustrating because this is a big deal.
Well, and I'll just say this. Look, I mean, this bill came up, as I mentioned, in New Hampshire, and once the legislators found out what it was, in a bipartisan manner, it died unanimously in both the House and the Senate. As we discussed, South Dakota defeated it 31-1. There are other states that once they found out what was in it, they didn't like playing those games. And what's ironic, if you take a look at, the lobbyist who's doing this, Sean Parnell, he testified in front of a Connecticut committee because he tried to get this passed in Connecticut, and his quote was, quote unquote, the whole purpose of this bill was throwing the system into chaos. This is a very simple way for non-participating states to throw the system into chaos. And that's his stated purpose. So North Dakota legislators who may have been sold a bill of goods to somehow think this might be a righteous or a political valuable or a good thing to do, are sitting on the other side here where they're literally voting for a bill that's explicit goal is to throw the whole presidential process into chaos. Well, we just had a presidential election that almost was complete chaos, and most of us don't like the results. So why would North Dakota be part of, an effort that might help create a new wave of chaos?
Yeah. Why would we want to make things worse? And again, I want to make it clear. This is not really about how you feel about proposals about the national popular vote. I can tell you I don't like them. I think, Saul, that you and I maybe one day we'll have that debate and we'll sit down and we'll disagree on an interstate compact or whatever. But it's not about that. This is a very different proposal. That this is not the way to address that. Let's just put it that way.
No, look, you're absolutely right. And again, I think, as I said early on, if you don't like something, let's bring it up, vote it down, and make your case. I mean, that's okay. Or, as you said, you and I can discuss this on another one of your programs if you'd like. And, we can go through why I think it makes sense as a conservative Republican and why I've backed it. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. This is not the way to address it. This is designed to create chaos at a time when our country is in such a flux today, so divided in a partisan way, where Republicans and Democrats are having a hard time even talking to one another. The idea of coming up with this surreptitious, clever, unique, secret ballot idea and have a solid Republican state like North Dakota pass it, when many other states have already just out of hand killed it once they found out how it was, because it was just too political. It's too sneaky. It's too behind closed doors type of, smoke-filled room politics. I don't think the people of North Dakota would like the idea that they're going to somehow have secret ballots for President of the United States going forward. I mean, the potential for abuse, the potential for misuse is huge, and it's just as undemocratic as it possibly can be.
Well, we ought to do the public. I'm as a member of the news media and a staunch advocate of transparency laws. I firmly believe that we do the public's business in public. You do it out in the sunlight, and there's no part of the public's business that's more central to the public's business than counting votes. It is everything else that we do in our government is built on that, and doing that in secret, even for a time. I mean, because again, I guess at some point after the electors meet, they'll release the vote totals. But even that delay is not good, because again, it shortens the window through which we can detect any problems. Mr. Anuzis, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Rob. Thank you very much.